Hello, we are Maria Fernanda Orion and Maria Jose Africano, and today we are going to talk about The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. It is a poem written by Samuel Taylor Coleridge in the year 1798. In order to get a better understanding of this poem, we first need to have some ideas about what is Romanticism was and how it affected the writing style and the topics used by the artist or the author.
Romanticism was an artistic movement that took place in the 18th century. It came right after Illustration and is actually a result from Industrial Revolution. When we are talking about this period, we can say that people were mainly focusing on their work more than exploring their feelings. So when Romanticism appeared, we see that contrast between the style of life they were having and how now they start searching for the meaning of life and how to share those feelings. So let's talk about some features of Romanticism. First of all, we have the exaltation of the self. Secondly, we have the loneliness feeling, and one of the most important characteristics of Romanticism is its deep connection with nature. And this is really important and it deserves to be highlighted because during the work of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, we are going to understand how the main character, or well, the characters are feeling by how the situation is described, but how nature is described. So that's really important, and it's also part of the features of Romanticism, the rebellion and the evasion of reality, like the surrealistic way it is wrote.
Taking this into consideration, we will explore some of the poem's important figures that can be observed during its reading. The word rhyme in the name of the poem means not only the rhyme on the poem itself, but also the frost which the mariner found in the North Pole, where is an important part of the story is developed. This poem is presented in 7 different parts, each representing a part of the journey that the mariner took into understanding of his spiritual and his relation with the nature.
Okay, let's go to the first part. In the first part, the main characters are presented to the readers. And, well, we have the mariner and the wedding guest, which is the person whom the mariner is going to tell the whole story. So the mariner started telling his story, like how he was going to Antarctica, and the ship was called by a foggy field. Nonetheless, an albatross appeared, and this creature is really important for the poem because it is supposed to mean good stuff, like good weather and cheer for the mariner and the tripulation. So the mariner decides to kill the albatross, to shoot the albatross, and it's not because he was ignoring what the albatross meant, but because he thought that it was the right thing to do in that situation. So he just decided to shoot the albatross. Important to highlight that the albatross is representing beauty and innocence. So we have to keep that in mind to understand the whole poem.
In the second part, we can see that the crew and the mariner are shocked by the death of the albatross. He hangs its dead body around his neck as a sign of guilt. Here we can see how the ship and the sea both reflect the mood of the crew and the mariner, because when they are all shocked by the albatross death, the sea gets quiet and no one dares to break the silence with words, noises, or even movement.
In the third part, I actually think that the third part is one of the more interesting parts of this poem because The mariner and the whole crew can see that a ship is coming, and there are two very interesting characters in the other ship. There are a men and a women that are representing the death and the life in death. And so the role of the nature is really important here, because we can see that in contrast with the other parts where the sun is shining and everything seems to be fine, here we have a really dark and scary situation. So nature is really dark, and well, everything is described as how it is felt by the character. It also happens in this part that the only one that survived to that encounter is the mariner, because all the other 200 men are dead.
In the fourth part, the mariner was left alone with the death crew. In order to remind him of his sin and that at the same time they expiate him. The expiate that he finds at the same time that he sees the water snake, which is described as glowy and maybe beautiful. The reference that he used to show his expiation is the moment when the death albatross falls in his neck, right after he discovers the water snakes.
During the fifth part, the ancient mariner is finally able to sleep. So everything is described like a really nice way. Everything seems calm, and he actually kind of recovered from all the things that he saw. He's no longer tormented by all these deaths, and his crew buddies return from the dead and take their regular duties. But they are now controlled by angelic spirits. So in the scene, everything is described as like very light and mood, the sun is shining, and that kind of stuff. The mariner now is not a sinner anymore, and is also no longer wandering the sea for what seems to be ages.
The sixth part shows us the hard-working crew behind the trip back home, and even with no wind and no waves, the ship moved faster than any other. The mariner falls into a trance until he wakes up in his homeland, where the spirits leave the bodies of his crew and retake their form of light. The monk is happy now with the mariner, because he understood that he is behind word of respect, just like every other living creature. So his trip back can now be faster.
In the seventh part, he finally arrives home. Now the angelic spirit in his crew bodies retake their real shape. They become lights again and leave their bodies, leaving the mariner alone in a sinking ship to be found by Hermit and his mate. He summarizes his tale by saying that the only people who loves God's creation can pray well and gain salvation. So, in conclusion, we can see all these romanticism features during the poem, like the importance and relevance of the nature to understand how the ancient mariner is feeling, and also it's important to highlight the suspension of disbelief and how the author writes the poem to make us believe or to make us understand something that we know that might not be able to happen. Like, we will think that this is something non-real or is wrote in a non-realistic way, but anyway, the reaction that the characters are having, like the guest wedding, make us think that this situation actually might be possible, even if it's not in our beliefs. and also the individualism that is represented by the way the mariner acts and think through all the work. So thank you.